Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to do something a little different.
Oh.
We're diving deep into a single source.
Okay.
The audiobook. Zedart Hodges, The Beginning.
Yeah.
The End. Anew.
Okay.
It's self-published autobiography, but it's so much more than that.
Interesting.
Zedart Hodges.
Yeah.
He weaves in social commentary and spiritual reflection as he narrates his life.
You're right.
And I gotta say,
Yeah.
it's a pretty wild ride.
What struck me was Hodges' honesty.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't hold back.
Wow.
Taking us from his childhood in poverty in rural North Carolina through decades of drug addiction and crime to ultimately finding faith. And as the title suggests, a whole new beginning.
Yeah, you really get the sense that he's laying it all out there.
Yeah.
So for you listening, consider this your shortcut to understanding Hodges' story.
Okay.
We're going to pull out the most compelling parts,
Right.
the real aha moments
Yeah.
that'll make you think differently about addiction, recovery, and maybe even your own life.
And I think it's important to start with Hodges' childhood.
Okay.
Because it sets the stage for everything that follows.
Right.
He was born in 1949,
Okay.
right in the heart of a turbulent time in the American South.
Wow.
Imagine sharecropping, selling moonshine, constantly moving. Instability was a fact of life.
It sounds like he was always searching for something more.
Right.
Something to fill that void.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine having to sell moonshine as a kid.
Wow.
It's straight out of a movie.
Yeah.
What I found fascinating was how Hodges' early experiences mirrored the struggles of many African Americans during that era.
Oh, yeah.
Lack of opportunity, the remnants of segregation,
Right.
the breakdown of families.
Yeah.
And you can see how these factors might push someone towards seeking escape.
Right.
And for Hodges, that escape came in the form of drugs.
Exactly.
Okay.
He starts dabbling in marijuana, then experiments with acid and psychedelics.
Wow.
During his time in Job Corps in California. But things take a sharp turn
Whoa.
when he tries heroin for the first time
Oh, wow.
with a Vietnam vet friend.
He actually describes heroin as a good high,
Really?
contrasting it with the downsides of alcohol.
That's interesting.
It makes you think about how addiction often starts with this idea of finding a solution, a way to numb the pain or fill a void.
Right.
But as we know, heroin is insidious.
Yeah.
It promises relief, but delivers a whole new kind of hell.
And that's where the real tragedy of Hodges' story unfolds.
Right.
He quickly becomes dependent on heroin, and his need escalates rapidly from sniffing to injecting.
Wow.
You see the physical and social toll it takes,
Right.
how it warps his perception and hijacks his decision-making.
The detail he provides is gripping.
Yeah.
He talks about using a dropper to shoot up.
Wow.
The constant cycle of shoot houses, you can practically feel the desperation and the grime.
Yeah.
What struck me was how he talks about this shift from occasional use to full-blown addiction. What's the tipping point?
Right.
When does pleasure turn into this all-consuming need?
It's a complex process.
Yeah.
But Hodges' story highlights how tolerance builds quickly with heroin.
Right.
You need more and more to chase that initial high. And before you know it, you're trapped in a cycle of chasing a feeling that you can never quite recapture.
And as his addiction spirals, he becomes increasingly entangled in the criminal underworld of Goldsboro, North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
He talks about stealing to fund his habit, the racial dynamics of the town,
Right.
the allure of easy money.
Yeah.
It paints a bleak picture of life on the streets.
What's interesting here is the moral ambiguity that Hodges reveals.
Oh, really?
On one hand, he's involved in theft and other criminal activities, but on the other hand, he describes robbing men who were exploiting young girls,
What?
even giving the girls some of the money so it wouldn't look suspicious.
Oh.
You see this internal struggle between his actions and a twisted sense of justice.
It makes you wonder, does he really see himself as a bad guy?
Right.
Or is he just trying to survive in a system that's already rigged against him?
Yeah.
I found the whole thing fascinating.
And throughout all of this, he's acquiring these colorful nicknames.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Red, Dirty Red, Pete, Half-Bred, even Scattered Brain.
Wow.
You can see how addiction affects not just your physical health, but also your identity, how others perceive you, and how you see yourself.
That nickname, Scattered Brain, really stuck with me.
Yeah.
He mentions it was given to him by someone he respected. And you can hear the hurt in his voice.
Wow.
Even all these years later.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how words can have a lasting impact.
Yeah.
especially when you're vulnerable.
Yeah. But it's not all darkness in Hodges' story.
Oh, good.
He also talks about turning points.
Okay.
Those moments that started to crack the hold addiction had on him.
Right.
The introduction of the 3 strikes law was a big one,
Oh, yeah.
facing the very real possibility of a lengthy prison sentence. If he was convicted again,
Wow.
he started to question his choices.
Okay.
You can see how that fear of losing his freedom
Yeah.
began to chip away at the allure of addiction.
It's almost like external pressure forced him to confront a reality he had been avoiding.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just the law.
Right.
It was also about a growing awareness of his own self-destruction. It's in jail that he has a chance encounter with a former classmate
Okay.
who had found faith and was living a clean life.
Wow.
That encounter plants a seed of hope,
Right.
a possibility of a different future.
It's fascinating how a seemingly random encounter can have such a profound impact.
Yeah.
It's like Hodges needed to see a living example of what was possible.
Right.
Someone who had walked a similar path and come out on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
It gave him permission to believe that maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
he could do right, too.
It's like that encounter flipped a switch in his mind.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about avoiding jail anymore. He was starting to crave something more, something beyond the immediate gratification of drugs. He was yearning for a real, lasting change.
And that yearning, that willingness to open himself up to something new paved the way for his spiritual awakening.
Right.
He talks about praying fervently in his cell, feeling utterly desperate for a way out. And then he has this vivid dream of a blue cross and a white robe. It's almost like a divine message, a sign pointing him towards a new path.
Okay, but couldn't you also argue that it was his subconscious desires manifesting?
Oh.
I mean, he was already starting to think about changing his life. Maybe his mind was just processing all of that through symbols.
That's definitely a valid interpretation.
Right.
But whether you see it as divine intervention or a psychological phenomenon,
Yeah.
the dream had a profound impact on Hodges.
Okay.
It gave him hope and direction at a time when he desperately needed both.
And that hope was solidified when he found Freedom Temple.
Oh.
It's almost too perfect.
Really?
He walks in, sees a blue cross, just like in his dream.
Wow.
And the pastor's wearing a white robe. You can't make this stuff up.
It's definitely a striking coincidence.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that Hodges emphasizes how Freedom Temple offered both teaching and preaching.
Oh.
He wasn't just looking for a place to passively absorb a message.
Right.
He wanted to actively engage with his faith to learn and grow and understand the deeper meaning behind the scriptures.
Yeah. It's like he was craving a deeper understanding, not just a surface-level acceptance of faith. And that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, regardless of their religious beliefs, can relate to that desire for meaning, for something to ground them and give their life purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for Hodges, that purpose became increasingly intertwined with his evolving understanding of love. His reflections on family dynamics are particularly insightful.
Oh, yeah?
He doesn't dwell on the negative aspects,
Right.
like his mother's struggles with alcohol. Instead, he focuses on the love he received, however imperfect it may have been.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
We often have these idealized notions of what love should look like.
Right.
And when reality doesn't match up, we can feel let down or even resentful.
Yeah.
But Hodges seems to be saying that love can exist even in messy, complicated situations.
Exactly.
Right?
He seems to be embracing the complexities of human relationships, recognizing that love can manifest in various ways,
Right.
even in the midst of pain and dysfunction.
And this nuanced perspective on love extends beyond his family. He talks about romantic relationships,
Okay.
the challenges of intimacy and commitment,
Yeah.
especially when you're battling addiction.
Right.
There's this really powerful anecdote he shares
Oh.
about giving away his car to a young man who was struggling.
Wow.
It's a symbolic act of generosity and compassion, like he's trying to break free from the selfishness that addiction often breeds.
It's a beautiful example of how Hodges' actions begin to align with his newfound faith and his evolving understanding of love.
Right.
He's not just talking about change. He's actively living it out, choosing to give rather than take, to extend compassion rather than judgment.
And this ties back to his framework of the 3 enemies.
Right.
The world, the devil, and the self. It's a fascinating concept.
What's so insightful about this framework is that it encourages self-awareness.
Right.
Hodges isn't suggesting that we become paranoid or fearful.
Uh-huh.
He's simply urging us to be mindful of the forces at play,
Oh, yeah.
the things that can sabotage our good intentions and pull us back into old patterns.
He uses this analogy of a merry-go-round to describe the cycle of addiction.
Oh, wow.
It's so vivid. You keep getting on seeking that temporary thrill.
Uh-huh.
But all the while, life is passing you by.
Yeah.
And each time you try to get off, something pulls you back in,
Right.
making it harder and harder to break free.
It perfectly captures that feeling of being trapped, of constantly chasing a fleeting pleasure that ultimately leads to emptiness.
And Hodges is brutally honest about the challenges of staying clean even after you've made the decision to change.
Right.
He talks about how people he used to run with would try to tempt him back into old habits.
Yeah.
How the allure of the drug world was still a powerful force he had to constantly resist. That's something I think a lot of people who haven't struggled with addiction might not understand. Recovery isn't a one-time event.
Right.
It's an ongoing battle against deeply ingrained habits and cravings.
Exactly. And Hodges stresses the importance of not relying on your own strength alone.
Okay.
He's critical of programs like NA and AA for not explicitly focusing on Jesus, arguing that they offer a bandage for a deeper spiritual wound.
But isn't that view potentially alienating for listeners who find support in those programs?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, for some people, those groups are lifesavers.
Right.
It seems a bit dismissive to say they're just putting a bandage on the problem.
That's a fair point.
Right.
I think it's important to acknowledge that recovery can take many forms, and what works for one person may not work for another.
Right.
Hodges' emphasis on faith reflects his personal journey,
Okay.
but it doesn't invalidate other approaches to recovery.
Right. So for Hodges, his faith becomes this anchor, this source of strength that helps him resist temptation and stay on the path of recovery. And he's not shy about sharing his beliefs,
Right.
even when they might be controversial.
He even goes as far as to say, Jim Crow ain't dead, he's just flying a little higher,
Wow.
suggesting that racism persists even within religious institutions. It's a sobering reminder that faith communities are not immune to the biases and prejudices that permeate society as a whole.
It's a bold statement. And it
Yeah.
makes you think about the ways in which systems of oppression can manifest, even in spaces that claim to be rooted in love and compassion.
And despite his critiques, Hodges remains steadfast in his belief in the power of faith to transform lives. He uses his own story as a testament to this power,
Right.
sharing his journey from addiction to redemption as a source of hope and inspiration for others.
And he does this in a way that's both vulnerable and challenging.
Right.
He repeatedly reminds the listener that you are not your own, urging them to recognize that they are part of something larger than themselves,
Right.
a spiritual reality that offers purpose, meaning, and ultimately freedom.
This concept of surrendering to a higher power is central to many spiritual traditions.
Right.
It suggests that by relinquishing control,
Yeah.
by admitting that we don't have all the answers, we open ourselves up to a greater wisdom and a deeper connection with the divine.
And for Hodges, that surrender was the key to breaking free from the chains of addiction and embracing a new way of life.
Right.
But he doesn't sugarcoat the difficulty of that process.
He describes how desire leads to deception and deception leads to disobedience, arguing that we're all easily misled by our own cravings and desires. He even uses his friend in prison, who was a master manipulator, as an example, saying that Satan is the ultimate manipulator,
Wow.
using lies and trickery to lead us astray.
It's a pretty stark comparison.
Yeah.
But it gets to the heart of his message.
Right.
He's basically saying that we need to be vigilant, aware of the ways in which we can deceive ourselves and be deceived by others.
And he offers this really striking image to describe the process of giving up control.
Okay.
You need a spiritual sledgehammer to tear down the walls of discomfort and the partitions of mayhem that have erected themselves in our godly lives. It's like he's saying that true transformation requires a forceful dismantling of the barriers we've built around ourselves, the defenses that keep us trapped in cycles of pain and dysfunction.
It's powerful imagery, and it speaks to the intensity of the struggle.
Yeah.
He's not saying that change is easy or that it happens overnight.
Right.
He's saying that it requires a willingness to confront our deepest fears, to break down the walls we've built around our hearts,
Yeah.
and to surrender to something greater than ourselves.
And that surrender, that willingness to let go of control, is a recurring theme in Hodges' narrative.
Right.
He talks about how for a long time, He didn't know anything about what it was like to do something right.
Why?
How he would do something wrong and call it right. It's like he was trapped in this inverted moral universe where his values and perceptions were completely distorted by addiction.
He was essentially operating within a completely different set of rules.
Anew.
And it took hitting rock bottom, experiencing the full weight of the consequences of his choices before he was ready to embrace a new way of thinking.
And even then, the process wasn't easy.
Yeah.
He describes those early days of recovery as a constant battle against temptation. He talks about how people he used to hang with would try to lure him back into old habits, how the pull of drugs was like a magnetic force trying to drag him back into the darkness.
It really underscores the importance of community in recovery.
Yeah.
Of surrounding yourself with people who support your goals and challenge you to stay true to your values.
And Hodges finds that community at Freedom Temple.
Right.
He talks about how the church provided him with a sense of belonging, a place where he felt accepted and loved despite his past.
But he's also quick to point out that it wasn't just about finding a place to worship. It was about actively engaging with his faith.
Yeah.
Learning the scriptures and applying those teachings to his life.
Right.
Okay.
He wanted a faith that was both intellectually stimulating and emotionally fulfilling.
Right.
He wanted to understand the why behind the what.
Yeah.
And Freedom Temple provided him with that opportunity.
It's interesting how he describes the church as a place that fed his spiritual hunger.
Yeah.
It's like he was craving a deeper connection with something beyond himself. And Freedom Temple provided him with that nourishment.
And that nourishment, that connection with a higher power, became the foundation for his ongoing recovery.
Right.
He talks about how prayer became his lifeline, a way to access strength and guidance when he felt overwhelmed or tempted to slip back into old patterns.
It's almost like prayer became a form of self-care. For him, a way to connect with his inner strength and tap into a source of peace and resilience.
Exactly.
Right.
And this emphasis on the spiritual dimension of recovery is a key takeaway from Hodges' story. He's not saying that willpower or therapy or support groups are unimportant.
Okay.
He's saying that for him, true healing and lasting change required a connection with something greater than himself, a source of love and grace that could sustain him through the challenges of life.
And that's something I think we can all learn from, regardless of our religious beliefs, whether you call it God or the universe or your higher self. That sense of connection with something bigger than yourself can be incredibly powerful.
Right.
Especially when you're facing difficult times.
And Hodges' story reminds us that connecting with that higher power isn't about passive acceptance or blind faith.
Okay.
It's about actively seeking understanding, asking questions, and wrestling with the complexities of faith in a way that informs our choices and shapes our actions.
He talks about how he used to scoff at church folks, singing, it's me, O Lord, standing in the need of prayer.
Oh, wow.
But now he understands the truth of those words, the desperate need for divine intervention in our lives.
Right.
It's like he's saying that we all need help, that none of us can do it alone, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit our need and ask for guidance.
And that humility, that willingness to acknowledge our own limitations and seek support from a higher power is ultimately what sets Hodges free.
Right.
It's what allows him to break the chains of addiction, to rebuild his life, and to embrace a new way of being in the world.
His story is a testament to the power of transformation, the possibility of redemption, and the enduring hope that can be found even in the darkest of circumstances. It's interesting how he frames his transformation, not just as a personal victory, but as a testament to God's power.
Yeah.
He constantly reiterates that he couldn't have done it alone, that it was divine intervention that pulled him out of the darkness.
And I think that's a key element of his message.
Right.
He's not just offering a self-help guide to overcoming addiction. He's presenting a spiritual framework for understanding the human condition, the struggles we all face, and the possibility of finding redemption through faith.
He even talks about how after he got clean, he felt this responsibility to share his story, to warn others about the dangers of addiction, and offer hope to those still struggling.
That impulse to share your story, to use your experience to help others, is a common theme in recovery narratives.
Right.
It's about transforming pain into purpose, finding meaning in your struggles, and using your newfound strength to uplift others.
And he does this in a very direct way.
Oh, yeah.
Often addressing the listener directly in his audiobook, challenging them to wake up.
Yeah.
to recognize the destructiveness of their choices,
Right.
and to make a decision to live differently.
There's a real sense of urgency in his voice.
Yeah.
He's not just recounting his past. He's actively engaging with the listener, inviting them to participate in their own transformation.
He even uses this phrase, "that's the real deal," repeatedly.
Oh, wow.
Almost like he's trying to shake the listener out of their complacency
Right.
to get them to see the truth of what he's saying.
It's a powerful rhetorical device.
Yeah.
It cuts through the noise, the distractions, the justifications we often use to avoid facing the hard realities of our lives.
Right.
It's a call to authenticity, a challenge to stop settling for a counterfeit version of ourselves and embrace the possibility of living a life that is aligned with our deepest values.
And I think that's ultimately what makes Zedart Hodges' story so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just about overcoming addictions.
Right.
It's about finding your purpose, embracing your potential, and living a life that is grounded in something bigger than yourself.
He invites the listener to consider, just as he did, am I going to die like this?
Wow.
It's a stark question.
Yeah.
A wake-up call to confront the potential consequences of our choices.
Right.
And to make a conscious decision to choose a different path.
And he makes it clear that choosing a different path
Yeah.
isn't about relying solely on willpower or self-discipline. It's about recognizing our need for help,
Right.
for guidance, for a source of strength that is greater than ourselves.
He emphasizes that true transformation comes not just from within, but also from above.
Okay.
From surrendering to a higher power.
Right.
A source of love and grace that can sustain us through the challenges of life.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Zedart Hodges' life story,
Yeah.
I'm left with this feeling of hope, of possibility,
Right.
of the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
His story reminds us that no matter how far we've strayed,
Yeah.
no matter how much damage we've done,
Right.
there's always a chance to turn things around, to find redemption, to embrace a new beginning.
And his story also challenges us to look inward, to examine our own lives,
Yeah.
to identify those 3 enemies that are holding us back,
Right.
and to make a conscious choice to break free from those patterns and embrace a path of healing and wholeness. What stood out to you the most in Hodges' story?
Yeah.
What does his experience make you think about your own choices and the forces that shape your life?
That's something for you to ponder as we conclude this deep dive.
Remember, freedom is possible,
Yes.
but it requires a conscious choice to break free from self-destructive patterns and seek a higher power for support.
And as Hodges reminds us,
Yeah.
true liberation comes not from willpower alone, but from seeking a higher power, a source of strength and guidance that can help us navigate the complexities of life
Right.
and embrace a path of healing and wholeness.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.